I will say, a lot of black men sometimes feel like they're ignored or they're put down, particularly sometimes even by black women in the media. So this is not that. But I do hear Roland's point that felt ignored. But you feel ignored, and then you go over to the other side. The oppressed feel oppressed. So then you go and try to align with the oppressor. So I'm not putting black men down, but sometimes it's like, well, some of you Kevin Samuels following Tariq Nasheed quoting people, please look at the truth and see what's happening and get in line with some of the black women. Is majority, like he said, vote Democrat, but that margin of people who can be plucked away from your people and go advance policies that harm your people, I just don't understand that.
Hey, what's going on? It's the Political Brown Kid here, and I want to provide some perspective to people, particularly the black community, on why a lot of black people, because it's not just, and look, it's not just black men, it is black women as well. There are a lot of people who have pushed back towards Kamala Harris. And I think that I just heard someone say, how can we get black men to fall in line? It was just a thing on that. I forgot who was saying it. It was his commentary. I don't know the individuals' names. But it's kind of like, well, why do we have to fall in line? See, it's language and rhetoric like that that turns people off. And that's kind of similar to when we were going through the whole COVID epidemic. And I'm going to kind of touch on all of that. So let me just start off by saying I want to do this content just to discuss why I think, and this is just my own personal opinion, why I think a lot of black people are turned off of Kamala Harris. And a lot of these thoughts are because I've experienced them myself as well. I think one of the reasons why a lot of people are turned off of Kamala Harris is because of Barack Obama. Actually, that's the starting point of it. You have to understand this. When Barack Obama first ran for president, a lot of us were so happy to vote for him, to see him win. Everyone wanted to see a black person do well. Whether it just so happened it was a black male at the time, but even if it was a black female, we all were going to go to that polls to support him because this was the first time you had a legitimate black candidate. We've had Jesse Jackson in the past. We had Shirley Chisholm in the past. We've had Al Sharpton in the past. Those three individuals did not make it. And they really didn't have that much of a shot. But this time we were like, okay, this is the Democratic nominee. They have the backing of the party. They're going up against, they've been nominated by the party to move forward. And so it was a legitimate shot. So that's why people got galvanized around Barack Obama to, number one, play an identity politics. But what happened after that first 4 years? After the first 4 years, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, is that a lot of people became disenchanted with Barack Obama. You can even look at Cat Williams had a special. I don't know what channel it was on, but Cat Williams, I don't know whether it was, I highly doubt that was Netflix platform because that was way earlier back in the day. But Cat Williams had a special, and when Cat Williams came out, one of the jokes that he told was, white people, I'm just going to let y'all know, we don't know what the president's doing. We really can't. He was speaking about Barack Obama, and he was like, excuse me, he was like, we don't know what this president's doing. We honestly, we just as confused as y'all. And so he basically, that was the running joke of his thing is that, hey, these first 4 years, we don't know what's going on. And we don't know what this brother's doing. We're disenchanted with him as well. And a lot of people lost a lot of faith in Barack and were disappointed. I know people who, and I'm going to tell you, because one of the groups of black people that you can be very frustrated with as a younger person are older black people, those civil rights blacks, because they just have an older mindset. They have a Martin Luther King's mindset to the way they approach things. And their approach to things is totally different from the way us younger people think about things. And I had this older guy, he was actually someone that I knew that lived in the neighborhood. We talked often, and he was very proud when Barack ran. And he made all kind of excuses to me and the younger guys in our neighborhood about why, hey, no, he can't do this, man. You got to understand, he a black man. He can't do this. He got to walk a line. And, we got that speech. And he was like, wait till the second term. And, you got this talk. And then when it came time to re-vote back for him, that older gentleman was like, man, I don't know. I'm just going to vote. He had lost so much confidence in Barack. And a lot of people, when Barack left after 8 years, was like, I'm disappointed in Barack. That's just the conversations that I got. So, and I'm basically saying that to say this. We saw what happened when we had our first black president. We saw that nothing really changed our circumstances. We were no better off than when we were underneath George Bush or underneath Clinton or underneath any other, underneath Donald Trump. When you look at Donald Trump's 4 years as president, all of that stuff was the same to us. You got everyone pretty much gets the same stuff. Everyone pretty much going to get a stimulus check. Everyone's pretty much going to get certain things. No, the world continually goes on. You don't get anything special. So we've kind of understood that. And now we're looking and saying, okay, this is round two with Kamala. And then also, too, you got to look, Kamala Harris and Barack Obama are very similar individuals. They're both non-foundational black Americans because they both come from a non-black parent. Even I consider Indians, particularly her mother, because not all Indians are black, but they do have Nubian African lineage when you look at Indian individuals. And even when I talk to some of my Indian individuals, because I know when you're in the IT shop, that's what you're around. You're around whites, blacks. In the DC area, you're going to be around everybody: whites, blacks, Indians, Asians. Or should I say Indians kind of are from the Asian continent, but you're going to be around Indians and people of Chinese descent, should I say. More or less Chinese. And also, I guess, people from Vietnamese, I do believe, background working there as well. But they'll let you know, they'll talk to me and they tell you what their African lineage and their Nubian lineage is when I talk to those Indians. And when you look at her mother does have a Nubian, you can tell that she has some lineage with her, but her parents probably don't claim that. So what I'm basically saying is you're looking at two individuals that come from non-foundational black Americans, and they also come from mixed race backgrounds. And then also to add on to that, Kamala Harris is basically taking the same playbook that Obama took. It's, I'm not touching reparations. I'm not doing anything just for black people. A rising tide lifts all boats. These are the same things that Barack Obama said. So that's one of the things that, while you're going to see a lot of black people have reservations about Kamala. I think now I'm going to get into the bigger issues, and I've already talked about a lot of this before. The way she was handed the job was pretty much an affirmative action type position. Now, am I totally against affirmative action? No. However, in this case, it was almost like she didn't have to do anything to get to where she is. She really did not. She lost in the primaries, in the Democratic primaries, to Joe Biden. And matter of fact, she even dropped out. I think before she dropped out, she wasn't even in the top two or top three. But Joe Biden adamantly stated, I'm going to pick a black woman to run as my running mate. So it was already said that whoever I get is going to be a black woman. We already know from his previous comments that he likes light-skinned blacks that are articulate. And he said that white people like Obama because he's light-skinned and articulate. So he wasn't going to pick a darker-skinned black woman. Now, once again, now here's where the colorism, where you see us blacks fighting, it's the brown-skinned blacks against the light-skinned blacks. It's the mixed blacks against the non-mixed. Like, this is where the colorism comes into play. And it's colorism on my part, I'm going to say. Because now it's like we don't even get a black person represented at us like a whole black person. We have to deal with Kamala. He couldn't pick Stacey Abrams. Well, he could have. If he had picked Stacey Abrams, I would have been happy. Stacey Abrams fought hard down in the Georgia area. You know how hard it is to fight and run as a Democrat in Georgia, in Alabama, and Mississippi, South Carolina? Those places are horrible. North Carolina is at least kind of purple, leaning more so purple, but you're talking about those areas are highly conservative, highly GOP. And Stacey Abrams was able to at least galvanize people around her. And if Joe Biden had at least aligned himself with somebody like a Stacey Abrams, then hey, he could have at least potentially had the South, the Georgias, the South Carolinas. He could have had those areas at least more solidified, but he chose a woman from the West Coast, a criminal defense attorney, now turned senator, is his running mate. Light skinned black because she passes the brown paper bag and the comb test. So that was just my personal issue with him. And that's what kind of like, oh, here we go. After all that she got up on that stage and said about Joe Biden, she literally looked that man in the face when they were running in the primaries, and she basically read him the riot act on that stage, and then he chooses her because once again, she's light skinned and that's what's going to sell. The other issue that I have with her is her lack of policies. Yeah, well, let me go back to that, and then I'm going to circle back to kind of like her just being handed the job. I'll circle back. So, lack of policies. I'll move forward with this one. She's been vice president for 3 years. She was in charge of the border. She did nothing about the border because they didn't want to do anything about the border. And then they realized that Democrats don't like what's going on at the border. And now all of a sudden in the last year and in the election year, notice you never see these politicians until it's election time. When it's election time, now all of a sudden they want to do their job. But she's been absent. You haven't seen her at a black church. You haven't seen her at a black cookout. You haven't seen her at an AKA meeting. You haven't seen this woman anywhere for the past 3 years. She's been hanging out with her white husband and her white stepchildren. And now all of a sudden, in the 4th year, she wants to do something about the border. And the Republicans, rightfully so, said, no, we're not going to pass any border bills. I would have said the same thing. Let's let this election play out. We're not going to allow you to clean up your mess now in the 4th quarter just so you can win an election. No, not going to do it. So she's been absent, and now all of a sudden, too, all of these cookouts are coming. The twerk parties are coming. They had a party at the White House for black females, and they had some DJs, and they had Kool-Aid with Tito's mixed with it. And it's just like, this is how they pander to us. And it's like, really, this is what y'all think of us? That, you bringing on Lil Boosie and Megan Thee Stallion and whomever they bringing out. And I'm throwing Lil Boosie in there. He wasn't there, but they just throw in a bunch of these rappers and stuff and think that that we just automatically are supposed to vote for them. Now I'm going to circle back to, when I say that she was handed the party, because I did not complete that thought. But once again, she was just given the vice presidential role because he wanted to bring in a black woman so he could shore up getting the black vote. Then what happens? 4 years later, he's pushed to the side by Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama. Mind you, if anybody's to blame for all of this fiasco that's going on, it is Joe Biden. And I actually think Joe Biden's okay. He's said some crazy, foolish stuff, but I think that he's an okay person. It's just that he's caught up in his age. And when you're 80-something years of age, I'm not going to say he has the right to be, because he's working a job that's very important. But at the same time, I'm going to give him a pass because of how old he is. But also at the same time, I am a firm believer that somebody should be discriminated against due to age, especially if they have mental decline. But he refused to drop out of the race. You had all of last September, last October, last November, last December. He refused to drop out. He refused to drop out in January, February, March, April, May, even in June. Then he chooses to drop out in July because he felt pressured by Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama. And not only did he drop out, apparently he dropped out and was ticked off with both Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama for forcing him out. But in him dropping out, the Democratic Party didn't say, well, let's let democracy rule and let's have a quick primary. Because, of course, to be honest with you, you really couldn't. The primary was already ran in January, November, December, January, February, right? So the primary was kind of done. But then they just said, well, then you had a bunch of black women come out and say that Kamala deserves, and not Kamala deserves to get the nomination. If it's not Kamala, then F y'all. We're going it was all of these threats that she deserves it. And I'm just trying to figure out, well, why does she deserve the nomination? What makes her deserve it? Just because she's vice president? And trust me, I've said the same thing about the president. I don't think that the president deserves to be the front runner just because they're the president. I said up and down, and you can go back and check my channel, that during every election cycle, the president needs to run in a primary, a good primary, and run up against strong candidates, not just have some flimsy primary thrown together, but run up against some strong candidates to prove and earn his job back. The presidential position is not one that you deserve. That's not an entitlement job. And so the same is true for Kamala Harris. Just because you're vice president doesn't mean that you deserve to be the front runner. You have to earn it. But once again, there was such uproar from all of the women in this country now. Like I told y'all, we're in the point where feminism, you cannot question it, you cannot criticize it, you can't speak anything negatively of feminism. You don't see anyone on television speak negatively of feminism. If you show me someone outside of the conservative ecosphere, because you'll hear Candace Owens speak on it, you'll see a lot of other people speak against it, but you don't see anybody from a liberal's perspective speak and say that some of the things of feminism has gone too far. You don't hear it. But getting back on topic is that no one will speak out and say, well, Kamala needs to prove herself. So automatically, now she was handed the front runner position. Pete Buttigieg didn't run up against her. Gavin Newsom didn't run up against her. These are all good candidates that could prove viable to at least say, hey, look, let's give her a run. And if she beats those three out in a primary, then fine. But they just galvanized behind her because she was a black woman. Now, the other thing, too, that I'm going to say is, well, I say that she was given everything. Here it is. You can't even ask her a challenging question without black women, or women period, but specifically black women, getting in an uproar saying that she's being attacked. You can't ask a candidate. This is a candidate that's going to be responsible for the military, responsible for nuclear weapons, responsible for wars, responsible for the future of the country. And y'all are getting mad at people for wanting to ask her hard questions that every other presidential candidate has faced. Here it is, a white man, and Donald Trump went to an all-black event, the National Association of Black Journalists. That man didn't sit down for 3 seconds. As soon as he sat down, he had 3 black women in his face, and the very first question he gets is, you're a racist. You said this negative thing about black people, this negative thing about black women. This is your track record with black people. Why are you a racist? And why aren't you a racist? And that's his very first question. And he pushed back on it, and I'm glad he did. But they didn't even give him a lead in. They didn't even let the conversation go on for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Let's warm this joker up. Let's kind of just give him some warm questions and kind of ask him other questions before we dive into That's kind of like with a movie. With a movie, you have it starts off slow. They're building up. They're setting the scene. And then you have a character arc, right? Right in the middle of the movies where you have the arc and the turbulence and all this other stuff. Then the movie kind of levels back down again. And then the arc goes back up to have the finale. And then it goes back down. They didn't even get that. And then contrast the questions that he has to answer to Kamala Harris. First thing she does is meet with old Big Lip, old BKB, as Cat Williams would say. Old Big Lip, old BKB, country bumpkin Steve Harvey. And then Steve Harvey has the nerve to look at the crowd and say, y'all don't get to ask hard questions. We ain't asking hard questions here. Y'all stop with all that. Y'all just vote. You don't need to ask what somebody's going to do for you. She's not here for that. She's here for the alley-oop. I'm here to throw her alley-oops. And she just gets to sit back like a helpless little, like she's Rain Man, like she's kind of some retarded child or something, that she just needs to not answer a question. I mean, this is what you can't ask her anything. All we get to do is ask her nice, soft questions. She gets to go into a debate. I didn't see the debate, so I'm not going to comment too much on it, but she gets to go into a debate with her soror. I think that's how you say it, soror. She gets to go into a debate with her soror on a Democratic channel, and she gets asked easy questions from what I'm told. I didn't see the debate. She doesn't get challenging questions that challenges her. She gets to sit down with Oprah Winfrey and she doesn't have to answer any challenging questions. Every place she's gone, she doesn't get challenged. And then when people challenge her online, because we're not hearing, if we had got the challenging questions during the interview, we would be satisfied if she had a decent response. But since she's not getting challenged, now you're seeing people on the internet wanting to challenge because they're not hearing that she has to go through a process. Trust me, I'm in the IT field. I worked as a consultant and I'm currently in private industry in the DC metro area. Now I'm gonna tell you like this. When you're a consultant doing software engineering work, when you're doing that type of work, you don't just ask. Matter of fact, I had a buddy before I even talk about that. I had a buddy that he went and worked for Microsoft. He actually left DC and went to Seattle. And he was a buddy on the job. Me and him were working at this consulting firm together. And he told me he had an interview at Microsoft. And I was like, oh, cool, because I've never interviewed for like a Microsoft or a Google. I just haven't. And so I was just like, oh, cool. And I wanted to figure out what the process was. I wanted to know because I've heard about all of these strange questions that they ask. And I watched the movie The Internship. The internship with who's the tall guy? I don't know, but it was about Google, them working for Google. It was that movie, and I just wanted to figure out what was the process. And he told me, man, he was like, man, yeah, it was very grueling, and I think he had 3 or 4 interviews, 3 to 5 interviews, and he was like, man, the process was very hard. And he said, man, they were just doubting my skills, and they just kept hammering me and questioning me about this. And they said that, well, you've been a consultant for federal government, and the federal government really isn't a hard place. And they were challenging him on this, that, and the third. And he's just like, they just kept hammering him on his work ethic because he was like, the government doesn't work hard, and you're a contractor with the government. And when I got my job in private industry, even the consultant job, I'm not going to lie, was a little bit easier. But when I got my job at the private company that I worked for in Northern Virginia, it wasn't probably not rigorous, but you know how many interviews I've gone on and have not gotten them because the interview process has just been rigorous. And then you learn as you interview, you're like, okay, I stumbled on that question. So it takes you about 3 or 4 jobs that you apply for you to get one because, you have to kind of figure out and kind of game the system because you got tripped up at 1 or 2 other interviews. But with her, she's running for president of the United States of America, and we can't ask her a hard question about her record as a district attorney. You can't ask her about her job as vice president. You can't ask her anything about her policies without everyone feeling as though you're attacking her. And Black women getting offended. And once again, this is where women, they always think that their actions have 0 consequences. They feel as though whatever their actions are their actions. You can't question them. And even if they had bad judgment, then it was someone else's fault. It was the matriarch or the patriarchy or the toxic masculinity. And it was always someone else's fault. And then if you challenge or ask a woman a question, you're being disrespectful to a woman. When you're just simply saying, what are your qualifications? Listen, if y'all want to live in a man's world and y'all want the same equal treatment as a man, this is what equal treatment as men look like. Getting asked hard questions and having to be accountable for things. I'm not making this stuff up. You have to be accountable. But they say we can't even hold women accountable. If you all went back and watched the debates, and I'm going back a couple of years, I'm going back to when I think Obama was running, as a matter of fact. But this is on the Republican side. When you looked at No, I think it was after that. I think it was when Donald Trump ran. When you look at Carly Fiorina, and it was a few women on that stage, they were allowed to overtalk past their time. They talked like when the bell rang during the debates. When the bell rang, they were still talking for 45 seconds, a minute to the after the bell, and the person kept having to tell them, "Your time is up. Your time is up." But the moderator, wasn't being controlling enough because they wouldn't cut the women off. The men were running over too, but the women were definitely running over. They were excessive with it. The women were over talking the men. No one complains. But as soon as a man over talks a woman, then he's being disrespectful. Girl, did you see how he was over talking her? Did you see how he was being disrespectful to her? But when women do it to men, it's oh, she's a boss. Yeah, she handled him. The same thing when you looked at when what's that lady? We're just talking Kamala. When Kamala ran up again, when she ran for president in 2020, what was that, 2020, during the 2019, 2020 debates and all that type of stuff, when they were having the debates, she literally went after Joe Biden, pointing at him. Basically, she pointed out all of his flaws, raising her voice. And that's how she jumped up in the polls. Because at one point she got a big boost, and that's when she started attacking Joe Biden. But because she's a woman, and probably also because she's a black woman, you don't see the men attack her. Joe Biden just sat there and took it. Because what do? As a man, if you're in a lose-lose situation, if you attack her back, you've just lost. You're going to turn off a lot of voters. And then if you don't attack her, now you look weak. And that's the same thing that happened with the debate with Donald Trump. When Donald Trump first ran up against Hillary Clinton, what was that, in 2016? No, 2020. When Hillary thought she was going to waltz into the White House with her hot sauce in her purse. When they had the one-on-one debate, everyone's talking about how he was snarling at her and he was over talking her, and he was being very disrespectful towards her. That's all you heard. And now in this debate, they talking about how he couldn't even look at her. She won the debate. He was scared. Because then what is he supposed to do? If he looks at a black woman and if he gives her the same treatment that he gave everyone else, he's definitely losing. So he's in a lose-lose situation. So that's what I'm just trying to say. Y'all get pancake walks. She literally has, no one has ever challenged her to say, what the heck are you doing? And then the people who are challenging her, and really it's just us on Main Street, as they call it, Main Street, with us civilians. As soon as we challenge her, the people online want to run to her defenses as if they're going to get a presidential appointee job. Or just because, I don't know, maybe she's your soror, maybe you went to Howard University along with her. I have no idea what y'all do up there at Howard University. But maybe because y'all feel as though y'all can relate to her or what have you, you feel the need to protect a woman who's not even protecting you. She's protecting her white husband and her white babies. I don't know what it is, but that's why people are turned off with her. And then the final thing that turns us off to her is, like I said, the people online that want us to get in line. There's an interview with a woman that said, she literally was talking on, I think this was on CNN, and she was saying, how do we get black men to fall back in line? Why is it that we have to fall in line? So that's the type of stuff that turns people off. And then you have people on the internet, as soon as you say something negative about Kamala, then it's almost like McCarthyism. You're a hater, you're this, you're a racist, you hate black women, you hate women. And then it becomes all of these other things, and it's just kind of like, that's not the case. I just don't like the way the process is going. And that's why I was going to make the analogy with this to COVID. It's something similar. I remember when COVID first started, I didn't feel any kind of way about taking the vaccine. I was leaning towards it. I was like, okay, when the vaccine comes out, because remember, initially they didn't have the vaccine. And I was like, okay, when the vaccine comes out, I probably will take it. But then once Krispy Kreme came out and said, we'll give you a free donut if you take the, and you think people think I'm exaggerating with this, but Krispy Kreme's offered free donuts, I think, for a week, or you get a free donut if you get the vaccine. Then I heard jobs. I have a friend that works in the federal government. If you live in the DC area, you probably have a friend that works in the federal government. So I have a friend that works in the federal government. And that friend said, okay, we have to get the vaccination. And he was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Because he was like, they're talking about firing us if we don't get the vaccination. And over in my company, I'm in private industry across the bridge in Virginia, they started talking about doing that, but it never went through. Thankfully, it never went through. But then people were losing their jobs over not being vaccinated. People couldn't go to school if they weren't vaccinated. It was all of this talk, we would give you this for free if you get vaccinated. And so my thing is, when people start pushing stuff like that, then it makes you question. It's like, well, why are you pushing so hard for me to get vaccinated? Like, why can't I not stay unvaccinated? And then it became a fight where if you didn't want to get vaccinated, if you told people outside, then the whole COVID thing became Democrats versus Republicans. That became politicized. If you told people, man, I don't believe in getting vaccinated, then people literally hated your guts. Literally. That's why I never told people that I wasn't going to get vaccinated. Because as soon as you did, the people in the DC area, at least in the DC area, they went berserk if you told them that you weren't going to get vaccinated. Girls literally would say, if you don't get vaccinated, I don't want to date you. And that's a fact. If you go onto a dating website when COVID, like even 2 years, like even in 2022, because I didn't start getting on dating apps till 2023? I think about 2023. When you got on, or 2022, 2023, if you got on dating apps around that time, people were like, if you're not vaccinated, don't talk to me. And then there were some people I noticed on white women's profiles, not that I was interested in white women, but they were popping up in my profile on one app. I was on one app because on one app you can't filter by race. You can't specify and say, I want to date a black woman. You have to take everyone. That's on this one app that I was on. And then when I was just reading through some of the women's profiles, it was the white women were like, if you are vaccinated, don't talk to me. So once again, like I said, you had these polarizing positions. So that's all I'm just want to point out. But it's like when people try to make you fall in line with something, that's also going to turn people off. Just why can't people just say, well, whomever you vote for, it's fine with me? I'm hearing some women now saying, if you're not voting for Kamala, don't date me. Or they're breaking up relationships because people don't want to vote the way they want them to vote. And those things are very troubling when you can't even have a relationship when everything is becoming politicized. So I'm just going to wrap this up here. But those are my reasons or thought processes around why people are such against voting for Kamala Harris. So I want y'all to drop your comments in the comment section because I definitely would love to hear what your opinions are on the subject matter. Also hit the like and subscribe button. Once again, this is the Political Brown Kid. I'm out of here.